Alright, here we're looking at the properties of exponents. We're going to simplify expressions involving powers. Now our only vocabulary here is scientific notation, which scientific notation takes the general form of this, where C is any number between 1 and 10. Well, actually it's less than 10. And we'll have 10 to the n power. Now n is an integer. Now, so it could be really large or really small numbers is what we use this for, and it's used a lot in science, hence the term scientific notation. Now let's look at a few of our properties. The product of powers, when we multiply and we have the exponents, we end up adding. So for this would be m plus n. Okay, now here we have a power of a power. Here we would multiply, so it would be mn. Okay, then here power of our product property. If we have this, it's the same idea, but our exponential 1, so it's going to be a to the m, b to the m. Okay, then if we have a negative exponent, to get rid of the negative exponent, we put it underneath like this, a to the m. Okay, a cannot equal 0 though. 0 exponent property, anything to the 0 power is 1. So we end up with a is equal to, but a can't be 0. And then the quotient here, when we're dividing and we have the thing, the a's are bases, we would end up subtracting, so it'd be m minus n. And then finally here, power of a quotient property, it'd be a to the m over b to the m, remembering that you can't have 0 in the denominator. Alright, now here we're going to look at a few examples. We have 6 squared, parentheses, to the third power. So for this one, we're going to end up with power of a power property. So it'd be 6, and then we'd have 2 times 3 for our power, which would end up being the 6th power. And then we take 6 to the 6th power, we end up with 46,656. Now here we're dividing, so it's the quotient power property. So we end up with 5 minus 3. Okay, so it'd be 4 squared. So that's going to be 16. And then here we have a negative exponent. Okay, so when we have negative, so it's our negative exponent property. So what we'll do is put 1 over 7 to the 4th to get rid of the negative exponent. And then we just do 7 to the 4th power. So we end up with 1 over 2,401. Okay, so here it was power of power property. Here was quotient of powers. And then this was negative exponent property. Alright, now let's look at number 1. Hopefully you can work this out by yourself, but let's do inside parentheses first. So it's going to be 8. Well, let me go ahead and go out. I'm going to do it. 5 minus 2. Okay, so you end up with 8 to the 3rd power. Okay, now here we did quotient property, just like we did in part B. Okay, now we're going to do power of power, so it'd be 8 to the negative 3rd, because we end up with 3 times negative 1, so it'd be the 3rd. Then we're going to use negative exponent property, so it's going to be 1 over 8 to the 3rd. And then finally we're just going to take 8 to the 3rd power, so we end up with 1 over 512 as our final answer. Now there's some of these steps you can kind of skip a little bit if you understand how we're coming up. You don't have to go step by step. Alright, Iceland covers about 1.03 times 10 to the 5th square kilometers. Alright, now this right here is in scientific notation. Notice that there's only one number in front of the decimal. Okay, and then we have 5, which is an integer. Okay, and the population of approximately 2.94 times 10 to the 5th people. About how many people are there per square kilometer? Okay, and so what we're going to end up doing here is taking the number of people, which is the 2.94 times 10 to the 5th, and we're going to divide that by 1.03 times 10 to the 5th, which is the land mass. Okay, now we're going to use the quotient property. So what we're going to do is I'm going to leave the numbers in front alone for right now. So it's 2.94 over 1.03. Now these have the same base, and we're dividing, so it's going to be times 10 to the 0 power. 10 to the 0 power is going to be 1. But let's go ahead and divide the 2.94 by the 1.03. So we end up with 2.85 times 10 to the 0, which again, that's going to end up being 1. So this is 1 times 2.85. So we'd end up with a 2.85. Now, with this, you can't have 0.85 of a person, so we're going to go ahead and round this to a whole number. So there's about 3 people per square kilometer. Let's look at examples 3. We're going to use the power of a product. So what we're going to do is we have this 3 here, so it's going to be 3 times 5. So it's going to be x 5 times 3, and then y squared times 3. So 3 times 5 gives us 15. 3 times 2 gives us 6. Okay, so now we have x to the 15th, y to the 16th over these. Now, quotient of powers. So we would end up with x 15 minus 15 because they have the same base, and then 6 minus 8. Okay, so when we do this, we end up with x to the 0 power, and then y to the negative 2 because we have 6 minus 8. So we're subtracting, so we take the sign of the heart. Anyway, we end up with negative 2 here. Okay, so now x to the 0 power is 1, so we're left with y to the negative 2. Okay, to get rid of the negative exponent, we're going to put y over x squared. I'm sorry, 1 over y squared. Alright, let's go ahead and look at example B. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is power of a quotient. Okay, power of a quotient. So we've got to multiply 2 times the 4. So it's going to be a negative 4 squared Alright, so we have a the negative 4 squared and b squared squared. So we've got to, basically we're going to multiply the 2 times the negative 4 and then 2 times the 2. Okay, so we end up with a to the negative 8, b to the 4th. Okay, now we have, this one's positive on bottom, so we're just going to go ahead and leave that on bottom. Now make this positive, we're going to put it underneath. And so we end up with 1 over 8 to the a to the 8th power, b to the 4th. Alright, so let's look at these real quick. First thing I would do is multiply the numbers together. So we get 28, okay, and then with this we're having the property, so we're going to end up having 10, 3. Alright, so now with this one, 4 times 7 gives us 28 times 10 to the 3rd. So when we're multiplying powers, so we actually end up adding, so we have 3 plus negative 2. So we're going to take the difference and get 1. Now this is not in scientific notation. Remember, scientific notation, we want one number in front of the decimal. So we can either move this over 1 and add 1 back here, so that we have 2.8 times 10 squared. Now this would be scientific notation. Or we need to write this, here we had, again, 2.8 times 10 to the 1st. Okay, and so if we move this way one place, well, it wasn't there, it was here, we end up with 280. So either one is acceptable, but 2.8 times 10 squared would be in scientific notation. Number 3 will be on part 2 of the video.